it's very nice to have you here. I've met you like 5 years ago, and that when I've seen your kind of work for the first time, I was quite impressed. I haven't seen much of that kind of stuff. So I always had this desire to sort of share about your music and tell many people about it. But then kind of for a while, I've forgotten about it a little bit. But then this year I was like, probably this is the time to do it. So now you're here, and we welcome you at the Gnesin Week Multimedia Studies. Thank you so much, Neil, for being here. Yes, so we're going to talk about, well, you're going to talk about your work. We're going to ask you questions, and hopefully everybody's going to enjoy this meeting today.
Great, thanks so much, Marat. It's really nice to thank you for inviting me, and it's really nice to be here and to be talking. Like I've never, I don't think my music has ever sort of appeared in Russia before, so this is something of a first, which is nice. So I thought I've basically prepared a number of clips and some images and slides. So if I thought maybe it's good just to kind of share those and talk at the same time. That's okay. It's more interesting than just looking at my face the whole time. Okay. Can you see that? Okay.
We can.
Great. I'm not going to go full screen with my presentation. I'll leave it like it's being edited just so that I can still see everybody's faces. So yeah, so my name's Neil, and I describe myself as a composer. Well, I usually describe myself just as a musician, actually, but I'm a composer and a performer. But I would say that my practice veers off into other disciplines often. I work a lot with video, I work a lot with sound, I work a lot with kind of theatre and performance and radio and all sorts of different mediums. So I grew up playing in bands, and I trained very classically, but I would say my work is sort of moved a little bit further away from that these days in most respects. So fundamentally, even when works can be sort of very multimedia, the idea of liveness is very important to me. And kind of actually, I mean, it's very basic, but simply working with musicians and creating things that happen live in a space is if there's anything that sort of holds my work together, I think that's a kind of concern that runs all the way through. So and often I'm performing myself in my own works. This is an image of a sort of bizarre Christmas concert that I gave a few years ago, for instance. And I would say these are now sort of slightly arbitrary images of just kind of recent projects, but perhaps just showing them as I talk, one gets a sense of the kinds of places that my work often happens as well. So sometimes it's in concert halls, but also in galleries, also in like public spaces, site-specific work. I would say, although I do write concert music, I'm doing less of that nowadays, and it's more about kind of bespoke, situated projects, perhaps. I don't think my works tend to be about specific ideas or topics often. They tend to be like a little bit more confused. I find it very hard to like make definitive statements about things. I'm a confused human being, but I think there are some maybe some running trends in the work that will come out today. One of the kind of ideas one of the qualities of the work that often people describe when they hear my stuff is that of saturation and overwhelm, a way of, I think often in my works, there's a sense of kind of bombarding the senses in some way, or challenging the senses, or kind of offering sort of too much information as a way of, for me, as a way of, I think it's a way of opening up spaces for interpretation in the work. And often that means using kind of multiple technologies sort of simultaneously. So live stuff, recorded stuff, video, language, text. And I think also in lots of my work, there's it's concerned with the relationship between a live performing body and the fixed or the recorded. So it's often about placing a live performer in a state of jeopardy or pathos. So yeah, the kind of, I like the messiness and the fallibility of something happening live. or the idea of like the potential spontaneity of some chaotic live element within a fixed media structure. There's like there's a tension there. There's also a kind of potential emptiness and kind of sadness to that relationship. And I think often in my work, that sense of kind of, I think about emptiness and the void and ghosts quite often in the work. It's horrible and it's morbid, maybe. So I've prepared a number of works to kind of to look at. Whether we get through all of them within the time, I don't know, but we'll dip into like a number of different diverse projects. So this is a piece from about 4 years ago that I wrote for. It was a commission for a contemporary music festival in London that has its own festival orchestra, the London Contemporary Music Festival Orchestra. And the festival at this time was happening in a huge space, a huge underground space in London that's an ex-factory. So it's large and it has kind of a huge ceiling. It's like a cave, basically. And so I decided to create a piece that was that would use the space in its entirety. This is the first time I'd written for orchestra, a professional orchestra, and I have a sort of problem with orchestras generally, in that they're this sort of kind of bourgeois institution, and also I'm so used to kind of like working in depth with musicians for a lot of time, and I found the kind of labor division of an orchestra problematic. This idea of having lots of people paid a relatively small amount of money for like a very short amount of time. So that the piece is in some ways about kind of challenging that kind of hierarchy of the orchestra. So in this piece, that the orchestra is put on an equal level to a number of other sort of medias. There's a screen at the other side of the hall playing things. There's like recorded sound. There's me on a separate stage giving the most pathetic performance that I could possibly muster. There's various sort of soloists that appear in different parts of the hall at different times, and the orchestra is kind of revealed or masked, but nothing quite. The piece is designed as a structure which is always subverting itself, always kind of falling apart. Nothing quite connects together. And the audience are in the middle of this kind of overwhelming, fractured structure. And this kind of, I suppose this, I will just play a clip that's about 10 minutes long, maybe. But I think that it's also maybe worth noting that although this isn't like, I didn't write this as a political expression, specifically, it was very much at kind of the height of the Brexit debate, or kind of in the middle of that. And sort of now looking back on it, I can see there's probably something in this about about kind of divisions and this inability to come to a consensus. So I'll play a clip now that is sort of comes in as this sort of fracturing reaches a climax, and then at the end of the piece, this beautiful compere appears, glamorous compere appears, and kind of leads the audience in a like a horrific sing along at the end.
Floor meets you, meets man, meets woman, meets dog, meets tooth, meets top, meets bottom, meets happily ever after.
Thanks.
Okay?
Exacerbatedly.
This is bad. This is the end. This is a tragedy. This is a traumatic echo. This is so bad. This is tragic. This is
Oh no. Extremely high. Futuristically projected. Hour early. Inevitably going on.
A minor. A minor flesh wound is the worst possible outcome. It's the most manageable outcome. A minor flesh wound is the most likely outcome. It's the best possible outcome. A minor flesh wound is literally everything you've been working towards. It's a minor flesh wound is everything you could ever want.
Tragically, a day later.
Okay? Oh shit.
Oh shit.
After all that, I'm here. A gross goddamn echo appeared togetherness. A forced suturing of your mind's old-fashioned heterogeneity. The end. Except it's not the end because we have to force this towards some kind of collective happy ending.
These individual physical bodies here.
Sorry, this is a bit clunky, but we'll skip forwards.
It's very important that I'd like you in this space with me, here, now, in this room, to sing along with me. Full-bodied, full of gas, full of music. Does that sound okay with you? I said, does that sound okay with you? Okay then. Here are the words. Here's the tune. Take it away. A grin all together now. A faulty stitch across the wound. A holy beginning again. And then we go straight into the repeat. A grin. And then we keep repeating again and again until the happily ever after. Everybody ready? I said, is everybody ready? Here we go. A grin, all together now. A fortress stitch across the wood.
Merry fucking Christmas.
Okay, so the whole piece in total is about 15 minutes long, but it ends in this kind of intentionally kind of horrible, ambivalent, unsteady sort of unison.
Can I just add my own comment from, because I've been there, I just want to share it with people, how it felt in the room. I just said that it created this very Christmassy kind of mood. Everybody sang together, you know.
It was about this time of year, wasn't it, Marat? So
yeah, it was
like
December.
Up to Christmas. So I'm happy to take any questions as we go, or I can carry on.
Okay, well, let's see if we have questions. People went, well, yeah, I can answer your question. Ira is asking if the people were located in one particular place so they could move freely. I think there was no order, right, to where people stood or sat.
The audience.
Yeah, the audience. Sorry, yeah.
There was no limitations, but I mean the way that the space is constructed, it's people were sort of basically in the middle of everything. In that space, normally the kind of floor area is occupied by an audience, and the way the festival curates itself, there are a number of stages around the space that the audience sort of turn around to face at different points. Yeah, so the piece was really written with that kind of energy and layout in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, I'll carry on then.
I think let's roll. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to sort of like sort of immediately diverge a bit and talk about something completely different. That is kind of traditional Japanese theatre, which has been this. Can you see is the image coming up again?
Yes, it is coming up. Yes.
Great. Which has been like a concern for mine, an interest of mine for a long time, and there's like a couple of concepts of it. I've studied certain forms of Japanese theatre in a reasonable degree of depth, and there's one particular sort of concept of mediated disembodiment that has, I think, kind of informed a lot of how I think about the kind of multimedia landscape. So there's you find it a lot in kind of there's a medieval form of Japanese theatre called No, and then these sort of Baroque, I suppose we might call Baroque forms of theatre of Kabuki and Bunraku, which is a doll theatre. The fascinating thing for me about Bunraku theatre is that there are kind of the construction of character and of presence on stage, or the presence of a character on stage, is kind of distributed spatially, sonically, and visually. And it's at once both kind of jarring to experience, but also kind of weirdly cohesive. And I see this as like a kind of parallel to how one might work with kind of multimedia in a contemporary sense as well. So firstly, the dolls in Bunraku, they're these huge, like heavy things. You can see them on screen here. And each doll is puppeteered by 3 puppeteers. One, oh God, I'm getting a FaceTime call. I'm just gonna. So first of all, the kind of unmasked, the puppeteer you can see with their face unmasked is controlling the head and the right arm of the puppeteer, and that takes they train for about kind of 30 years to be able to do that, or 20 years to be able to kind of do that.
Yeah.
And then these two hooded people, one controls the left hand and the other controls the 2 feet of the puppet. And so there's 3 people manipulating the kind of body of one character.
But you said there's 2 hooded people. I think there's only one on the picture, no?
Yeah, but you can only see because one of them's controlling the feet, so they're probably ducking down quite.
Oh, I see. So there's 4 in total. How many? Sorry.
I reckon there's 6 people in this image in total, but you can only see 3.5 of them. And then the voices of all of these characters are not voiced by the puppeteers, but by a pair of offstage musicians, Gnesin musicians, and it's normally a shamisen player and a solo vocalist, normally a male. I mean, it's a traditionally all-male theatre. Now it's a little bit more diverse, but everything is voiced by this one guy who embodies all of the characters on stage. And yeah, and that's it. And sometimes there are other offstage musicians playing percussion. This is a picture of the stage, and you can see the musicians are on the. This is actually a larger group of musicians in this case, but on the right-hand side of the stage, the puppets are in the middle. You can see on the left hand, there's this offstage room where sometimes there's percussion. And so like the presence of these characters are kind of spread across whatever it is, 40 meters, 50 meters. Okay, I'm going to play just like a 1-minute clip of a performance, but in kind of academic literature, this distribution of character is sometimes referred to as a kind of mediated disembodiment of character. And I like this phrase quite a lot. Okay.
君のはどうしやったあんまりお前がさもかろうと思っておやなればこそなればこそわしがような不幸なものが何としてそなたのような高校な子を持ったこれもいいあのうちかとで抱きしめ泣く涙
Great, and it's this kind of distribution of character, I think, and this sort of fracturing of the body on stage that are very sort of intentionally in a lot of works have tried to explore, and that maybe comes across like most clearly in this strange little piece of mine, Deepy Kaye, which is a piece that is designed to be, it's sort of written for a video. It's written with like the video edit and the sound edit in mind, so it exists in its purest form as a film. So the piece is a sort of the piece is a musical setting of a number of like pieces of fan fiction that I wrote myself about the actor David Patrick Kelly, who is a sort of, he's one of those actors that kind of like you reckon he's not that famous, but he's sort of also, and he's at various times in my life kind of intersected with my cultural interests. So here he is in the 1985 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando, which I've loved since I was about 12 years old. A little later, as I was
sorry, I didn't say. Yeah, you were 12. You liked this film, right?
Oh, I don't know. Well, from 12. I mean, I still love it. A little later, like as I was getting interested in weirder stuff, like he crops up in Twin Peaks. He's in the original Twin Peaks series and the kind of new Twin Peaks series as this kind of stoner character. but also he's in my PhD, I was researching a lot the work of this avant-garde theatre director called Richard Foreman in New York. And David Patrick Kelly actually starred in many of his sort of kind of really kind of experimental avant-garde plays in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. So he feels like an entity in the universe to me that keeps coming through my consciousness. And so this piece, well, maybe you could translate that bit first, Marat. So this piece, Deepy Kaye, the idea is through narration and through sound, I sort of conjure the outline of this person, David Patrick Kelly, but never name them or reveal them clearly. But he hovers as kind of like a phantom presence almost in the middle of kind of a sort of maelstrom, sort of storm of media, of kind of like images and sound and edits.
It's 1985. I'm 34 years old and preparing to shoot the elaborate shopping mall scene in the movie Commando. I draw on Oriental acting techniques I learnt a while ago. 1. Look in the mirror and regard yourself. 2. Embody another human body. 3. The training assistant director, Karen Gaviola, knocks on the door, interrupting. Problem, not shooting on a soundstage, but on location. The dialogue is going to be too difficult to record live. You and Arnold, you will need to overdub everything sometime in the future. I know Craig Heath, the set's boom operator, and go and find him at the cruise craft stand. I heard about the troubles with the mall. Yeah. I saw a picture in my mind. Cool, shoot. I think I can make it out of my mind. A sketch idea for an improvised Fisher boom stand on the back of my hand. It's a technique which allows for much more detailed and accurate captures.
They tried a suggestion with mixed success. In the final edit, though, they keep the live sound in the car park, where Schwarzenegger rips out the car seat before running down and killing him.
Funny guy. But nowadays it's like 2015, and I'm back with all the perspective that offers. Now in my 60s, an actor reincarnated as Charlie, a hand for hire, cleaning up after the unnecessary violences in the movie franchise. Charlie is a tough role to play because with no exposition, he's got to convey 1. Decisiveness. 2. Inscrutability. 3. Numbness. 4. Warmth. I say to myself, how can I be in this? It's 1997. With no exposition has to convey 1. Surety. Yeah. 2. Paucity. 3. Arrogance. And 4. Sexual magnetism. I say to myself, how can I be in
Charlie's
this?
scene became one of his least favorite moments of both and 2. but it's one of co-star Ian McShane's favorite scenes of the first film.
In 1990, I'm playing the lead role in the theatre in Hartford, Connecticut.
The play is called Voisek. It's basically a guy in a confused mental state who ends up drowning.
Later on, the lighting crew reassessed and found there was no problem. The ringing must have been an auditory illusion.
It wasn't true. It wasn't true. It was true. It was true.
What is it? What? Speak to me! Speak!
Forget that. Here's what really happened in 1990.
Don't feel too confused.
I have nice and the nature Nicholas Spark.
This untruthfulness is normal.
Deterioration is inevitable.
These memories are licks of dull paint.
Your image of this chap
She's really struggling to get the band to stop inside.
Just an avatar that hovers over
I
everything.
said to him, maybe we should have fresh metal down because their fitness model hasn't even opened up any audio over the video when the one from the viewers can't accept audio visual 4 years on.
Whoa, I can't believe I'm on stage right now.
Okay, you're watching a guy who glues his ear to the screen and half hears.
You at home, check your pulses.
What famous movie star do you think I resemble?
This is pretty dumb, maybe.
Sometimes I wake up after leaving the TV on too long and the station drifts into my third eyeball.
This is definitely pretty dumb, maybe.
This is not your foot.
This is a poor fidelity reconstruction of a late scene in 2017. He's older.
This is not your foot.
He's stoned. 2-camera shoot, first and third person perspective.
This is not your foot.
His foot talks to him. He is in a constant, deep, uncomfortable lunge. Here's where those mime skills come in handy.
A pitch. This guy captures his physical and psychological form in a new medium for deployment indefinitely, alternatively, futuristically, supernaturally, posthumously. At the ending. Maybe.
I'm wearing the same shirt in both performances, which is
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. I thought it's like a thing you do, like just to wear the same colored shirt.
No, other shirts do exist.
Okay, not the...
I wonder, there was a couple of other just like shorter kind of clips from other pieces that I wanted to play, but I wonder whether we just press on with it or if there are questions, we can take them now as well.
I've got a question, but let's see if maybe somebody else has a question about this work or something.
Yes, I do have a question as it happens. Neil, first of all, I am absolutely fascinated by what you have just shown us. And I have actually two questions. One is a small one, and the second is a little bit bigger. The first is, did you do the editing yourself in this piece? Video editing, I mean.
Yeah, so I tend to. I'm basically really yes, I did is the answer. But I'm really fascinated by the edit in general. This idea of the edit. I mean, it's just sort of. I was talking to Marat a couple of weeks ago that, like, for me, kind of, I'm not so interested in like technology itself, but I am quite interested in like the language and the rhetoric of technology, and just how we as human beings kind of navigate this like mediated, kind of edited version of reality that we're sort of engaging with. So I get very excited about like I get excited, perhaps too excited about like documentation and like sound editing and kind of the image edit as well.
Thank you for the answer, because I got to tell you, there isn't a picnic this video editing. This is a complicated piece of video editing. So my other question is sort of related to it. I would just like to have your opinion on this. How do you think the knowledge of technology, of video editing stuff, of sound editing programs is important for contemporary composer? Because it seems like that the composer that doesn't use this nowadays is like illiterate in a modern culture.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's an interesting question, actually. And I'm not sure I totally, I wouldn't say illiterate. For me, it doesn't feel essential to engage with technology at all. It's just something that kind of lots of us are interested in. But for me, I think it's, I can only talk personally. So for me, the kind of interest in that side of things, and the reason that I do use, I mean, I'm not using like high-tech stuff. It's like video editing and sound editing. I mean, it's all around us. But the reason I'm interested in it is because of sort of what it's, because of the kind of the languages that it can speak in, which often, yeah, it's more kind of like the language of the technology rather than the sort of technology itself. But I don't, but also, you know, on a very practical sense, I'm aware that like more people encounter my work online than they do in person, probably, or at least, or maybe it's kind of equal. And so in a very practical way, like I do enjoy like taking care of how it's presented as like an audio recording or a video as well. But also, and sorry, Marat, this is a long sentence now, but also like once I get into that, I'm also like, well, like what is a video of a performance? Is it just like is it just like a functional presentation, or can it actually speak in a different way to the live performance? Like the kind of relationship between documentation and live is like really complex and problematic and exciting for me.
Thank you for your answers, Neil. It's I got my my information.
Okay, yes. But I think kind of coming out of that discussion, maybe it's interesting just to have a bit of a look at a kind of a recent piece of mine for the pianist Zubin Kanga. And you might have come across Zubin if you've been looking, maybe you saw Wiki Piano or some of that work as well. So Zubin's an Australian pianist based in London, and he has a large project, a commissioning project where called Cyborg Soloists, where he commissions composers to make works for him as a pianist using some form of technology, basically interactive technology. So I made a piece for him recently. It's quite a long piece, about 40 minutes long, probably too long, and maybe I'm gonna maybe cut it down a bit. But it's very much interested in this idea of kind of a mediated disembodiment, the idea of again conjuring a sense of like either a character or a kind of a sort of meaning which never quite comes into focus. So this piece that I made with Zubin is for piano. There are two videos playing simultaneously, and there's text, there's narration, there are subtitles on screen. and it speaks through the language of, specifically, I was interested in the kind of the kind of language of kind of expanded media for deaf people, for blind people, like accessible media, basically. So the piece, it happens on a stage, but the attention on the stage is kind of, sometimes it's drawn towards Zubin as a live performer, sometimes it's drawn to kind of one of the video screens, sometimes there's kind of pre-recorded sound, which is like masking everything. There are subtitles, things are audible or not audible. And there's also a key presence on screen in the form of this deaf performance artist, Chisato Minamimura. And the title comes from the title is a reference to weight and descent, and there's a sense in the piece of always being bogged down by something, or similarly this broken form of connection between Zubin's sort of abstract pianism and this more kind of sign language based communication of Chisato, I suppose. But the sort of link between them that sort of manifests itself halfway through the piece is this kind of sensor glove technology. So at some point in the piece, Zubin wears these gloves made by a company called Mimu, that I'm sure everybody here probably knows this sort of technology, but it's full of, you can trigger samples with the fingers. It has kind of 3-axis sort of potentiometers and there's accelerometers in the glove. And essentially it's linked with Ableton. It's basically like a MIDI controller that you can link with Ableton Live. So he wears these gloves sort of halfway through the piece and is able to, well, you'll see when we look at the clip. Yeah, I'm no artist, but here we sort of like mapped. There's sort of a parallel kind of movement and hand gesture score. I'm obsessed with hands. I don't know where that's coming from, but basically hands. Yeah.
beautiful ones. Like 39 kilograms.
Yeah, so it's sort of quite a heavy, quite an abstract piece. It's sort of, I think, kind of exploring a lot of these concerns in a in a more abstract way, perhaps. But I also love just the like absolute ridiculousness of these sensor gloves as well. I mean, they're just sort of absurd, and it in quite an interesting way. I mean, it's like this. It's yeah. I tried to use them in this piece in a way that kind of highlights their like sci-fi ridiculousness.
I think we might have a question, Neil, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, first of all, thank you, Neil, for this piece. It's very interesting. I like such types of performances, but I have some maybe silly musicological questions, but let's see. So how would you define this? Would you say it's a multimedia performance, multimedia piece? You know, how would you kind of tackle that issue?
I mean, to be honest, so thank you for the question. To be honest, I just don't think I would define it. I'm not sure it's my job so much, but I suppose to me it feels like that's a really difficult question.
Okay.
It's like it feels. I mean, it feels like music to me. Like it's a composition, but there's like a really heavy. There's way more video in this than I would normally. This is like the biggest sort of most video heavy piece that I've worked on, and so it's an interesting question that it does feel different. It felt different working on this than it has on other pieces, and actually, it is a good question because I feel like it feels like the piece that is maybe not kind of ideally done in music spaces as well. Like we want to do it a little. We've done it twice now, and I think actually the audience for it feels like potentially quite different to like a regular kind of new music audience. So perhaps it's just a multimedia piece. I don't know. Well, how would you describe it?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a difficult question. That's why I asked you, because I don't actually have an answer for that. But yeah, so I think it is. I can see that for you, music seems to be still the primary core. It's just maybe more like an extended music, where of course other elements just are part of it now, and that's really what it is, isn't it?
They do, like filmmakers have this thing of expanded cinema, which I always quite like that as a term, and maybe there's an argument for sort of expanded music or something.
Okay, do you know much about George Apegis? I think you say in English. Do you know? Yeah, so he had a piece apparently at ICAM in 2008, which also used gloves. Have you heard about this?
No, I don't know that piece specifically, but I'm aware like this, sensor glove technology has been it's not cutting edge technology at all. It's been around for a long time.
Okay, so yeah, have you programmed the gloves yourself? I assume you have, because you can program them in any way you want, right? It's not like predefined, pre-configured.
Yeah, that's right. You can obviously define the samples and the processing that you're using, but then you also you teach gestures to the gloves as well, so you can custom design all your gestures. So the ones we used with Zubin were specifically ones that we tried very hard for what Zubin was doing to not look like sign language, but to be more kind of mundane and everyday. So it's kind of like more also like archetypal gestures of thumbs up or thumbs down, or sort of swearing or things like this.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I realize we're at 12. I had one more clip that might round things off sort of neatly, but also perhaps we're at.
Okay, there's a question from the chat.
Yeah, I would like to read the question from our YouTube chat. So, Neil, do you use the term happening to describe your art?
I quite like, so I obviously know a fair bit about happenings. That I don't think I've ever used that term myself, because I do think about it as that feels like a historical term about a particular sort of type of working. It's interesting. Like, a lot of people say they see a connection with like Fluxus and that kind of world of things. For me, like, a happening is a little bit, I think my work is a bit more structured than maybe happenings. It's have a little bit more control, but I'm not offended by the word.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can just look at the final clip.
Yeah, so this won't take so long, but I thought maybe so at the minute I'm on this kind of weird residency at the moment. I'm living for a little while in the south of Germany, and trying to bring my thing up, which is in a, I mean, it sounds very luxurious, and it basically is, but in a castle in the hills outside Stuttgart, with a castle on one side and a forest on the other side. And I could try and maybe I'm going to attempt to show you the forest very quickly, but it involves unplugging my HDMI cable. So
yes, I'll translate. I'll slowly be interpreting more
for me.
Yes, let's pray.
But essentially, once I got here, I'm sort of so surrounded by nature. Are you still there? Can you still read me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm so surrounded by nature that I came here with an idea of making kind of multimedia work, but immediately sort of realized that actually there's something really valuable about being like in the countryside. So let me stop so you can see my face full. So this is sort of, I'm not doing this as a flex, but it's just to kind of prove that this is also the world. But this is sort of the view from my studio door these days. So it's this sort of wintry German forest.
Mm-hmm.
So I found just spending a lot of time in the forest, and sort of surrounded by quiet and nature, I've become kind of interested in working explicitly like away from technology for a little while, and kind of working with kind of acoustic means to produce kind of like noise music in a way. Specifically, I've become kind of interested in like the sonic properties of leaves, which are here drying on my wall. Yeah, there's something interesting about working with like very humble musical means, and sort of these leaves as like ubiquitous instruments that feels like robust and transportable and organic in the way that sort of like pieces with loads of technology and like multiple screens is definitely not, and also kind of rich perhaps in a sort of in other sorts of ways, ecological ways, or site-specific ways, seasonal ways. So I'm going to play you a clip that's just maybe sort of 3 minutes long of just some leaf playing. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. Okay, we'll pause there. That goes on for hours. But there's so I'm not sure where that's going yet, but it feels to me personally at the minute important to have this kind of non-technological counterbalance to what I normally do. And the idea of being able to just like turn up and make something interesting happen without equipment and technology is sort of quite important to me. It's just sort of, you know, the kind of pure sort of practical musicianship really, and this Leaf stuff feels very intuitive and non-academic and non-intellectual in a way that I think is, yeah, for me important to have in balance with these other perhaps more sort of conceptual projects. So it's a bit of a nascent practice at the minute, but I'm starting to like do shows with Leaves and also lead kind of workshops as well. This is a clip from this is an image from a kind of nighttime forest walk that I organized last weekend, for instance, and taught kind of leaf blowing at midnight in the middle of the sort of South German forest. And there's something very there's something kind of raw and magical and sort of beautiful about it all, I think. Maybe that's a nice maybe that's a nice moment, a nice place to sort of leave things.
Yeah, okay, well, that was great, Neil. Thank you so much. We've got a few questions, I think, so let's just, yeah, we still have to hold on for a bit later. Okay, so we've got a question about Cornelis Cadiu and the Scratch Orchestra. Well, first of all, thank you for such an interesting lecture. So what can you say about Cornelis Cadiu and the Scratch Orchestra, given that they were kind in England, right? There were those people who were so much involved with improvisation and with this with performance as such, maybe. So how important is this period and this experience? How is it, yeah, is this important for the kind of current English artists, so to speak? So what role does it have in the sort of a legacy or lineage of maybe English performance and experimental music?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like Cadiu as a composer is like I don't think his work is like performed so much in England these days, and he's not really sort of a really explicit part of the conversation. But I think the legacy of the Scratch Orchestra is important, particularly because there's a number of people who are involved in that who are now you know, important teachers in the conservatoires here. Howard Skempton, like maybe Gavin Bryars as well, like John White. People like this are kind of they you know they have generations of sort of students below them now, and so I think there is a whether we like it or not, or whether we're aware of it or not, I think that legacy of the Scratch Orchestra is sort of embedded in experimental music practice.
Neil, my question sort of goes back to the second piece that we saw today, and it's connected to the fact that what we saw, it was just like, you know, the perfect impersonation of the idea of mediated disembodiment. And you mentioned before that you have been always fascinated by that Japanese doll theater. I sort of forgot the name for it, but you have said that. And my question is, have you tried or maybe even learned this theater yourself? Do you have this experience?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult with Bunraku specifically to sort of train in it, but I have trained a little bit in no theater, which is it's not puppets, it's people it's this very slow form of theater. You wear masks, and it's similarly kind of distributed across the stage. So there's like a choir, there are actors, you're kind of a doll yourself a little bit with this mask. You sort of lose your ability to express stuff facially. And I've studied that sort of academically, but also I've done some training in Kyoto for that as well, which was a very like a really seminal experience for me, actually, spending sort of 6 weeks intensively thinking about how how one functions as a performer in this very sort of odd, unsteady, kind of ancient multimedia thing. Yeah, but I've also been to see a lot. So my wife is Japanese, so we spend that's kind of, you know, where she sort of introduced me to this sort of a decade ago or whatever, and so we're there and try to kind of just go and see this stuff as well. So it's, yeah.
And the last one, if you will, how did that learning and experience affect? How exactly did it affect your way of thinking as a composer? Can you give us a little specifics?
Yeah, it's so before I sort of did any actual kind of embodied training, I found myself like really fascinated by the surfaces of that kind of theatre and the way it looked and the kind of vibe of it. And I'd always felt a little bit kind of exoticist, I suppose. But I don't know why. You can translate that first bit if you want, Marat.
Yes, thank you.
But there is a but.
Yeah. Okay.
But kind of spending time actually doing it. What I got from that was kind of a sort of a couple of things. A kind of deeper appreciation of how different elements within that theatre function, and specifically the fact that they're like very autonomous up until the last minute. So no theatre specifically, which I that's what I did the training in. The actors, they don't rehearse with the musicians and they don't rehearse with the choir. Everybody just knows their parts, and then it kind of comes together in the active performance. And they're kind of connected, but they're also kind of autonomous. And there's almost like a sort of dreamlike. There are some moments that are, you know, tight and snappy, but those are within a texture that's much more dreamlike. And actually, if you ever get the chance to go to a no theatre, particularly in Japan, you'll see like there are many people in the audience are literally asleep or kind of half asleep during the performance because it's slow and it's long. But that kind of dreamlike hypnagogic state is sort of, it's also like the ideal way to appreciate that work. And it's kind of, if not encouraged, it's totally fine. That space halfway between kind of waking and sleeping where things are just kind of, you know what I mean? So I would say my work is like, my work is not, I don't put things together randomly. Like you know, everything is like controlled and decisions are made, but also I like this idea of like having kind of sometimes multiple things happening at the same time. And yes, okay, being in control of like when those things happen, but like not necessarily being in control of exactly what the kind of vibe, the sort of combination of those things is going to mean or say or how they're going to kind of resonate completely together. I like the sort of openness that the kind of multiple kind of layers might.
Okay, anybody else? I think we have a little bit of time. Okay, so we have a couple of questions from our YouTube chat. So the first question is, do you, Neil, play any sort of musical instruments? Which instruments do you play?
Leaves. And but also I guess I play a bit of piano and some guitar, and I played trumpet as a kid. I play a lot of instruments to a kind of very mediocre degree.
Mm-hmm.
But I find actually being an active performer often, you know, in slightly more experimental ways, but just being on stage and performing like is really key to me. I think all composers should do it.
So the question is, remember the Regretfully Yours Ongoing, the piece, right? There is a melody at the end that everybody sings. Did you write it yourselves, or is this some kind of citation of some other material?
No, I wrote it myself, but it's supposed to sound like a kind of I wanted it to feel a bit like Hey Jude, like the sing along at the end of Hey Jude, you know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it does sound like that actually.
Yeah. But, yeah.
There's a lot of resemblance.
But the melody is original. It had to fit over. It's a chromatically descending bass line. I wanted that it felt important to have like a sort of baroque, like lamenting bass, and so the melody is changed to fit over that.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, we can ask one more, or we're gonna wrap up now.
I can take one more. I probably have to go. I have to disappear in about 3 minutes, but I can take one more question.
Okay, one quick question. Anybody? Okay, Neil, my question, which is your favorite, because people love asking this in Russian, what's your favorite composer?
Okay, I don't ask me that. No, I can answer. I don't know. It changes. It changes day to day, week to week. I've always really appreciated like John Zorn's universe that he's built. This kind of, it's so like multifaceted, and certainly he was a big influence. But I think probably my favorite composer is Charles Mingus. Just because I love the energy in his work, where it's like it's super controlled and like really complex and like composed. But when you hear it on recording, it just sounds like that there's genuine like chaos and like riot in that music. And I think that kind of energy is amazing.
Okay, I think that is it for now. Right. Great. Thanks so much, Neil. We really enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed it. It was really great. Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
So yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think we're done. And thanks everybody for joining in.